Hey, welcome back to Pat's Thanksgiving two-parter collection update extravaganza, brought to you by the WB and Bloodlet. Bloodlet's still going. It's going on in this early singles collection, eclectic. Actually rewound a little bit because I really like this song, but this is earlier stuff. I think it's their first 7-inch. Could be wrong, but a lot more hardcore influenced. A little bit more. This song has like a fast thrashy part. It's great. Before I start blabbing about Bloodlet again, let's just quit while we're ahead and get into some Greek stuff recommended to me by Eric from the High Defamation podcast, which you should listen to. The latest episode is a banger. All kinds of death metal shit you ain't never heard but is awesome is covered on it. So I talked about Sarcastic Terror, and he said, yo, check out Horrified and check out some Septicemia. And I did. The original cover art for this Horrified was a Giger painting, which probably wasn't sanctioned, which is why they opted for this Photoshop that threw up and decided that a baby doll with branches coming out of his head was a good idea. Thankfully, the music more than makes up for this. 16 tracks on this, the original full length, and some bonus stuff from EPs and whatnot. Black Lotus Records 2005. That explains the cover. 2005 right there. Damn. Put this out. Originally came out in 93. Full lush instrumentation. Blanket of like mid-pace melodic death metal underneath it. Over the top. Keyboards and synths and everything replicating sort of a neoclassical kind of feel. So fucking good. Operatic female vocals, a bunch of cool instrumentals that are super medieval, nerdy, fantasy sounding. This is an all-day vape, as a wise man likes to say. Bonus points if you know where that comes from. Anyway, Septicemia, the other band recommended to me. Stiff competition with Horrified. I still like this a lot, not as much. Very different contrast and sound between the two recordings compiled on here. So we got a demo from 89, Naturum de Mondo, and an EP from 92, Sabbath Conventions. The demo is like pretty raw, somewhere between black and death metal kind of stuff. 89. I need to give that some more listens. I've actually just been skipping ahead to the Sabbath Conventions EP, which is really good. You know, it's in a similar fashion, kind of like, you know, fairly simple, straightforward death metal with some melancholic leanings and a little bit of keyboard work. Really catchy and good, though. Really, really fucking good. So thanks to the big man for the recommendations. Next up is a very, very solid band from the Midwest, from Ohio, Cincinnati. My Annie Lane lives there. What's up, Annie Lane? What's up, Faith Extractor? So I saw these guys, no idea who they were, back in 2015. I don't think I quite had my fingers on the pulse of like everything going on in the death metal underground at that point. They opened for Incantation in Syracuse, and I loved them. And I don't know, I've just been lazy. I got the split with Crucified Mortals, which is excellent, as most of their material is. This is their 2013 release on Deathgasm, entitled The Great Shadow Infiltrator. For different things, varying opinions on the cover art. I dig it. This weird, you know, big box kind of computer game, sci-fi kind of vibe. It's weird because I feel like, to talk about the music, Faith Extractor's just incredibly solid, well-written, far above average death metal stuff. Not trying to directly be, you know, traditional or old school or anything. It just being played by a bunch of vets who know what they're doing and how to structure a song. I feel like it doesn't sound like anything else trying to ape that, if you know what I mean. It's just solid. You know, nothing's trying to be obscure or shadowy. It's pretty aggressive, pretty violent. You know, a little bit on the thrash and form side in the riff department. Memorable. You know, not a riff salad, not overtly repetitive either. just really fucking good, you know, like, you can understand the vocals, you can interpret what the guy's saying. It's good, it's great. I gotta get more. So, that's how I feel about that. Been sleeping on Faith Extractor, and I'm deeply shamed. Next up, Conceived by Hate. So, this is an interesting one. It's weird, it's you know, in that Bermuda Triangle between the three genres, which the next two CDs I'm going to talk about are as well. Death, thrash, black kind of stuff, from El Salvador. Very surprisingly cleaned up kind of sound from a band from that neck of the woods. You know, I always think of just anything from Central or South America being like dirty and primal, and it's not. It actually almost has like a slightly scooped mids, like Pro Gear, Pro Tude, influenced by like later At the Gates and Haunted kind of parts, with some of the melodies and some of the more up-tempo riffing. The slower stuff is a little bit more melodic. It has a certain layer of grime that saves it from sounding like that kind of stuff, but there's elements of that, and that's pretty interesting. I don't know, it was a pickup on Deathgasm. Ordered a bunch of stuff from there recently, obviously, and it's good. You know, I'm not sure if I'm going to go back to it a lot, or if it's going to grow on me or not, but I mean, dudes can play their asses off. Cool swirling cosmic thing, as is the style nowadays with a lot of releases. Really sorry about the glare. Downside of having this light here. Trying to get it so I don't blind everyone, but you can still see my beautiful, beautiful face. We'll see how that goes. Next up, Superstition, The Anatomy of Unholy Transformation. American band, Southwest, came out on 20 bucks spin this year. Again, this kind of lives in that Bermuda Triangle between those three. Thrash, death, and black. It's very shadowy, very haunted sounding. I feel like the riffs are really complex, not overly mathy or anything. They're kind of melodic riffs, but they're complicated-ish, thrashy riffs with like kind of echoey vocals, and the riffs repeat a lot, and almost kind of, and it's a good thing. It kind of creates sort of a hypnotic kind of vibe that a lot of, you know, like Dark Throne kind of went for that, but with way more simplistic stuff in a totally different context. But it creates that kind of entrancing sort of thing. And I think this band is pretty, like, singular in their sound. There's not too much that sounds like this. I read reviews, and I'm kind of like, they're, like, talking about, like, I don't know, like, Altars of Madness, and I can see that somewhat with, like, some of the riffs, but I don't really hear it. I think they're doing their own thing. It's real kind of, like, bone-chilling kind of effect with the execution of the music, these kind of shadowy, echoey, kind of reverb-affected vocals, kind of drawn out over the music. I like it a lot. Vampire, heard a lot about this band. As far as I know, they're Norwegian. This came out a few years ago. Big label, right? Century Media. Very big fan of the packaging. I love the cover art. Glossy digipack there. Like the logo. First couple times I listened to this, I'm like, what is the big fucking deal? I mean, it was good. Again, elements of thrash, black, and death metal. And I was like, nothing's really grabbed me about it. I hear a lot of people sing their praises. This sort of new wave of newer, you know, bands of this ilk. Condor, Antichrist, all that kind of stuff coming out of Europe and Scandinavia, like new thrashy death kind of bands. Straight up thrash or black and thrash, whatever. If I say thrash one more time, my tongue's gonna fall out. I need a drink. And then I kind of put it on today and was like, actually, this is growing on me, and I feel like it's because I'm starting to pick out certain really basic, like, bludgeoning Celtic Frost nuances with some of the riffs. And also their solos are really fucking, really, really pretty. They're kind of classically inspired, classical scales and stuff that kind of give it like a vampiric feel, which is appropriate. Alright, so if we can step away from the straight up metal shit. Not that long ago, I was at the mall, not my usual mall, different mall, at a Newbury Comics, a different Newbury Comics. And I noticed that they had a couple of Sheer Terror CDs pretty cheap. and Sheer Terror is one of my favorite bands of all time. I have pretty much their entire vinyl output at this point, but I picked these up because I love them, and here they are. Thanks for Nothing, a re-recorded version of their record Ugly and Proud. Mentioned Maze Craze Records last update. They got ripped off, decided to re-record most of their album. The album previous, Ugly and Proud, had more of the kind of dirty, almost speaking of Celtic Frost, guitar tone that they had on their first record. This guitar tone's cleaned up. I think they changed some personnel, and it made a world of difference. Some of the songs are a little faster, a little slower than the versions. I like both, but they got a little bit more like rock and roll on this. Still maintaining that, like, you know, dark, heavy New York hardcore kind of sound, equal parts Negative Approach, you know, and some New York bands. There's still some of that, like, early primal Celtic Frost kind of metal stuff on it, but there's also, like, some Sabbath coming in. They even do a Jethro Tull cover on it, if that tells you anything. They actually do a great job of it as well. But I can't, there's not a single Sheer Terror record I don't like. Paul's one of my favorite lyricists. The lyrics on Three Your Bitch Alone are fucking great. Follow this up by the record that came after it, Old, New, Borrowed, and Blue, which I think was the only one I didn't have. I'd love to have the 10-inch of this, but right now I'll settle for the CD. It's a pretty short record. It's only got 4 songs with a hidden bonus track, so 5. Old, New, Borrowed, and Blue, old song Walls off their first record, Broken, a new song, Everything's Fine, Borrowed, which is a cover of a Saints song, and Goodbye Farewell, which is a sad song. And then after some like pops and crackles sampled from a record, they do I Still Miss Someone by Johnny Cash, which is fantastic. Just a lovely, lovely ode to Johnny Cash, who's an artist I'm sure Paul is a big fan of. But it's a cool representation of Sheer Terror, a cool snapshot. Walls is like a fast, heavy, hardcore rager, with giving it this like very full production they didn't have on the first record. Broken is an interesting song, a song I hated the first time I heard. You know, I heard it, I think, in like 2000 or 2001 when I got the Bulldog collection, compiled like almost everything by Sheer Terror. And I mean, it's in a lot of ways almost kind of like proto nu metal. You know, it's got the kind of crooning vocals and this sort of like funky rhythm to it. And all I could think of was, this sounds like everything on MTV, sorta, kinda right now. Not the rappiness of those bands, but that kind of heavier alternative kind of shit. And listening to it over and over again, I just kind of eventually realized, okay, yeah, but this is a good song with good lyrics. Maybe not in a style that you're used to or like, but the song is actually just good. The Saints cover's great. Goodbye Farewell is a great, sad tune. Next up, Take Offense. The new Take Offense. Keep an eye out. So, if you're not familiar, Take Offense is a band from Southern California. Got a couple of other records out, an EP, a couple of LPs on Reaper Records, and I always dug them a lot. They were taking kind of this modern, metal-tinged approach to hardcore, a la Terror and Madball, that kind of stuff, speeding it up, throwing in a little bit more like Venice, LA thrash stuff, taking in like some vocal influences from Mike Muir. There's a strong like kind of LA suicidal Beowulf, Excel kind of thing going, mixing with, you know, a harder style. They did it really well. Fucking shredders, good soloists. And this is an example of them kind of expanding, you know, wanting to do something a little bit different, retaining their original style and going more in a direction that's slightly more technical. I'm hearing like second Crumbsuckers record, maybe Prong, a little bit more angular, weird, technical, like technically sound proficient, start-stop kind of stuff. I'm still on the fence of how I feel about it. It's not so much the music, it's more so what the guy is doing with the vocal approach to it. The previous approach was like kind of harder, rougher vocals, and then for the choruses he did sort of a Muir-esque like singy style. And this, it sounds like he's trying to find a middle ground between the two, and it just feels kind of odd. I'm not sure, it might grow on me, much in the way like the vocals from the second Rest in Pieces record were kind of weirdly sung, and then I just couldn't stop listening to it and started loving them. I feel like there's a certain similarity there, not so much in the way that they sound, but just like this sort of odd approach that doesn't feel like it fits, but then after a while it's so unique it might start appealing to me, that kind of thing. Yeah, I don't know, I need to spend more time with it. Definitely is a step outside of their comfort zone from their previous efforts, but I like the riffs for sure. The riffs, the guitarist is pretty fucking great and a good writer. Now back to blasphemous metal. Impiety, Skullfucking Armageddon. Another record where I was like, I need to get this again. I had a burn of this, 99, 2000. Drummer of my old band burned it for me. Technically, probably the first like war metal recording that I ever came across. Re-listening to it, it's way more thrashy and black, like melodic black than I remember it being. I remember it sounding like a bomb going off. And it does have that certain like Ross Bay cult, you know, kind of bestial element to it, in certain aspects of the recording and the change-ups in the song structures. But the riffs themselves are more evocative to me of something slightly more melodic, like a, I don't know, like December Wolves or Ares Kingdom even, or Absu or something like that. Really, really good riffing. It's, and in a lot of ways, right now, at least, if I'm craving something like that demonic, I'll probably grab this CD before I grab anything else by any of the aforementioned. It's just that well written. Really enjoying this Impiety CD right now. It's nice being reacquainted with it. Need to open another seltzer. Getting thirsty. All this talking. Anyways, next in the stack is Primordial, A Journey's End. I like this. I still haven't figured out if black metal like this is my wheelhouse or not. There's just so much to it. It's so dense. This atmospheric, folky stuff. You know, there's quite a few bands on Bind Rune that I like. It's just, I'm such a lazy fuck, and I just love, like, immediate satisfaction and 1-2 punch kind of stuff. But I am a fan of Irish music, traditional stuff, a lot. Was listening to Pranksgiving upstairs yesterday with my son. You know, when I was over there 20 years ago, I went to a lot of those, like, trad sessions and watching everybody just kind of jamming off of jigs and reels and stuff. And I feel like, I mean, not all the music from there is informed by that, you know, modern music. But there's some pretty noteworthy bands of many different genres where you can just hear it, you know, kind of filtering in. Biggest of which being Thin Lizzy, of course. And I feel like just tastefully enough, there's touches of that in Primordial. It's not like Cruhan. There's another band that I've listened to on and off where it's like directly throwing in Irish folk. But just the way certain riffs twist and everything like that, I think Primordial kind of weaves it in such a way that's really cool. But I gave it a couple spins through, 2 or 3, while reading a book. And yeah, it's definitely very moving stuff. But again, I don't know. It's just so much goes into like sitting down and like taking all of that in. For whatever reason, you know, a band like Horrified, it's a different kind of experience entirely. I don't know why that is. Anyways, next up is At War with Shadows. Healing is Not an Option. This is a band that I've been wanting to just pick up one of their CDs for a while. Oddly, more because of the personnel than the music itself. I heard their music briefly on a podcast, and that's part of why I'm a big podcast nut. I listen to equal amounts of podcast and music as I go about my day. Most of the podcasts I listen to are like smaller. They're not sponsored by anything. They're done out of just the love, I guess. Dude's just talking shit, and most of them are pretty funny. There's one that doesn't really update very often, has mostly called it a day, called Kissing Contest. And one of the people from that podcast was the vocalist for this band At War with Shadows. They were metal-influenced hardcore, metallic hardcore, you know, whatever you want to call it, from Albany, New York, during the mid to early 2000s. Right now, Mike, the singer, has a new podcast with, I believe, the guitarist from this band, called Border Boss, and it's fucking hilarious. Half of it, they talk about fast food, particularly Taco Bell and some other stuff. And the other half, they talk about albums they haven't listened to yet, and they listen to them, and they almost never have anything positive to say about them. And it kind of actually is helpful for me to just try to be a little bit more objective, because I tend to just only say good things about music, so thanks to them for that, I guess, helping me be more of a prick. But anyway, this came out on Hater of God, which was the singer from Monster X's label, the straight edge grindcore band that was around back then. And you know, it's good metalcore. It's the good metalcore. You know, there's no none of the stuff that sucked about metalcore later. You know, the kind of the emo vocals and the cheesy keyboards and that kind of stuff. That this is before that genre took a shit, basically. Inspired by a lot of the melodic kind of Swedish death metal stuff, I'd say. But not in a crappy way. And you know, they weren't just listening to Slaughter at the Soul. They were probably fucking with some like Dark Tranquility and other stuff going on at the time, and probably other types of metal as well. The main hardcore signifier in it is the use of a lot of like minor chords for melodic parts, which is something you don't get in metal that much. Great, furious, just losing his mind, nervous breakdown kind of vocals, courtesy of Mike. It's quite good. It's a nice little EP, you know. Saw it in a distro and picked it up. This, I'm not sure what happened. I think I was drunk one night and decided I needed this, to be quite honest and frank. Next up, we have Sandblack Church, Let in Life. This is a band that, like, I just hated for years. I loved them at first, and then I hated them. And then, now that I'm older and more mature, I feel like I can go back to them with an open ear. They were a band from here. They were from Boston. They were a huge deal. Huge deal. There was this wave of bands in the early 90s in the Boston scene that kind of took the faster, angrier, traditional hardcore stuff and started weaving in metal, some rappy stuff, some kind of like maybe just like rock parts, like hard rock parts, a little bit of funk. Like, it was something very of the time, very 90s. A lot of it didn't quite hold up. There was a lot of bands like Tree, Honky Ball, Sweet Diesel, but I think they were actually from New York, these guys. But I don't know what happened, but this came across my ear holes not that long ago, and I was like, man, Sandblack Church is way better than I remember. And it's true, like, I like this, but man, it's a lot to go on. This is a lot to take in, as good as it is. The weird thing about it is the guitar tone. It's really grimy, like 2 shades away from being like an HM2, you know, entombed like kind of guitar tone. Just grinding to the point where you can't make out some of the individual notes. The vocalist is a maniac. I got to see them once. His name's Jet. He definitely very influenced by HR from the Bad Brains. That kind of like, you know, almost scatting and singing, like all over the place kind of vocal approach. When he kind of goes into like actual melodic moments, he sounds almost more like Dave Brockie from Gwar. And he has this kind of like almost freak out, like kind of thing, where like at a certain point I was like, oh no, fuck. I'm listening to it and he's doing that and I'm thinking to myself, this sounds like System of a Down. What the fuck have I done? But then that moment stopped and it went into like a thrash part, and that's what's cool about this. Like, for a hardcore band, I'm air quoting all over the place, excuse me. For a hardcore band, they're doing, you know, pretty complex songs. Not all of it makes sense, but it's all pretty interesting. All the riffs are good. Their thrashy, like kind of thrash metal parts are a lot of fun. Really good. There's a lot of good stompy parts. There's some parts that just come off as dated to me, but I mean, I picked this up, you know, $3. I was drunk and I was like, man, I need a Sam Blackchurch CD. So I don't know. It's been growing on me. I've listened to it a few more times, and it's so unique. You know, even for its time, when everybody was kind of in this scene was kind of messing around with different sounds and performing some experiments that didn't quite work. Like, nobody was really doing it like Sam Blackchurch, but that part that sounded like System of a Down really did bum me out. I think I'll get over it. This is another one, like, had it back in the day. At the time, it was too metal for me. I was kind of branching out of the kind of grind and crust stuff that I was into and getting more into, like, US hardcore early 80s revival that was going on, and starting to explore some more, like, mellow, relatively speaking, mellow bands like New Model Army and Husker Du and The Cult, and getting into stuff like that. So, and I wasn't at a place yet where I can listen to all of this, like now, but I bought this Commit Suicide CD. I think they played one of the Hellfests I went to, and there are a few bands that were coming out at the time that were playing almost like a death grind kind of thing, and they were, I think, playing with death metal bands and grind bands, but they were also popular with kids that were getting really into, like, that metalcore scene. It was kind of a bleed over at the time. This is really good. I need to spend more time with it again. Something that I got relatively recently. It's pretty vicious. All the songs are real short. You know, there's definitely, like, a quick and to the point kind of grindcore spirit to it, but it's definitely pretty complicated, you know, pretty technical. There's a lot going on thrown at you and then it's over kind of thing. Not surprisingly, it's on Willowtip. I think a lot of the early Willowtip stuff was like that, but yeah, I mean, it's kind of overwhelming. And that's, I think, what they were going for. There's something with the drum production seems very of that era that doesn't really appeal to me, but other than that, I'm liking it quite a bit. There was another, I almost bought a Circle of Dead Children CD along with this, and then I sampled it on YouTube and I was like, nah, those vocals, can't do it, nope. But I also remember them being very popular and having some of their stuff around the same time, so just shit from that era I got nostalgic for. Recent pickup at a shop, Exciter Heavy Metal Maniac. My vinyl copy is pretty shot to shit, so I figured pick this up on the cheap. It was around $10. A couple of bonus tracks from a single, I think, and some interviews. Classic, you know, speed metal from Canada. What's weird about this is it almost sounds like it's ripped directly from a record. I don't know what's up with that, or if it's just the production itself that sounds like that. It sounds like crackly. You can't go wrong with Exciter. Any of their early output, first 3 or 4 records, just vicious heavy metal, cranked up in speed, cranked up in volume. Not quite hitting the thrash pocket yet, but in some ways cooler than a lot of the thrash that would come later. And then I finally decided to pull the trigger on some Fate's Warning. I saw this was only like $12, and it's looks like an OG pressing, Metal Blade. It's one of these cool dual CD things that they used to put out, and it includes the first 2, No Exit and Awaken the Guardian. And again, with stuff like this that, you know, has a lot of composition to it, takes me a while to really sink my teeth into it. I enjoy it quite a bit. For whatever reason, any guy that's doing the traditional belted out, you know, very sung power metal vocals, it takes me a while to get used to them. The first 2 listens, I won't say I hated this, but I was like, fuck, this is grating on me. And then, like, the 3rd or 4th time, it really just, like, hit me right there. It hit that spot. And I don't know why that is. Like, this guy doesn't sound too different from Bruce Dickinson, but maybe just the way the vocals, like, flow with the music. It's instantly gratifying with, like, the heavy hitters like Iron Maiden, but not so much with Fate's Warning, that are a little bit more technical and a little bit more involved. I don't know what's up with that, but it's growing on me now, and I really like it. There's certain parts where it slows down, it hits like a plateau, where I can hear where almost bands like Solitude Aeternus, Candlemass, Penance, you know, etc., like the epic doom stuff. I feel like that element of Fate's Warning and probably a few other like early power metal bands, like that's really where they get, you know, their epicness from. I could be wrong, you know, no expert on this shit, but interesting. It just, yeah, one of the slow parts I was like, that's Solitude Aeternus all over it. All right, that's it. Everybody on this continent, have a happy and safe holiday. Everybody else in the rest of the world, I hope your Thursday goes well. I'll be back very soon. Gonna be talking about tapes, vinyl, special guest coming up, so watch out for that.